Good morning, and welcome to the First Existentialist Congregation of Atlanta. We are a philosophically based spiritual community founded on existential philosophy and guided by feminist principles, and dedicated to human liberation and the protection of the natural world. My name is Patton White, and I will be facilitating this morning's celebration of life. We make our spiritual home in the Old Stone Church, which was hand-built 100 years ago by the African-American Antioch East Baptist Church. We honor their labors of love and the powerful history of this special place. We acknowledge that our spiritual home stands on land forcibly taken from the Muskogee Creek people. We support justice and equality for all Indigenous people. Our opening words today are a poem entitled Winter Trees by William Carlos Williams. All the complicated details of the attiring and the disattiring are completed. A liquid moon moves gently among the long branches, thus having prepared their buds against a sure winter. The wise trees stand sleeping in the cold. Again, that's a poem by William Carlos Williams entitled Winter Trees. This morning we are going to hear a familiar tune. We have heard this one before, but it's been a while, and it's always one of my favorites. And that is the song Shenandoah, and it is being brought to us by the following musicians: Gene Heinrich on the keyboard, and Mick Kinney on the violin, and Robert Stewart on vocals. So please join in singing Shenandoah.
Hey, bound away across the wide Missouri.
Thank you so much again to the lovely rendition of that tune. I just never can quite get enough of it. Thank you so much to the musicians. Today's speaker, we have Reverend Kimble Sorrells back with us. Reverend Kimble Sorrells is an ordained minister in the United Church of Christ whose ministry lies at the intersection of contemplative practices at justice work, using spirituality and contemplative practices to equip us with the peace and resolve to be justice makers in the world. As a bivocational minister, Kimball also works as a program coordinator for the SEE Learning Program at Emory University's Center for Contemplative Science and Compassion-Based Ethics. Kimball holds a Master of Divinity from Candler School of Theology at Emory University and a Bachelor of Arts in Religion from Berry College. They are also a registered yoga teacher and draw on this and other spiritual traditions to inform their ministry. Kimball is currently pursuing a certificate in spiritual direction to be able to deepen their ministry as well. Kimball has experience in a variety of ministry settings. They have worked in LGBTQ advocacy for many years, including as staff for Reconciling Ministries Network and the Atlanta Pride Committee, and organizing with Atlanta's trans and queer community. They have also served in local congregations and as hospital chaplain. Please join me in welcoming Reverend Kimble Sorrells.
Good morning, friends. It is good to be with you again and to share some reflections about compassion. Because of my job, I spend a fair amount of time thinking about compassion these days. However, what I will share with you today is not anything from our curriculum or speaking on behalf of my employer in any way. Rather, I want to share a sort of a personal reflection on how I have practiced compassion over the years and how that practice is increasingly important to me. As I've spent more time working in compassion education, I have found myself revisiting and recultivating it as a spiritual practice of mine. Perhaps it is also because the world around me seems so increasingly harsh or full of suffering. People are facing both health and financial challenges from the pandemic. And of course, this feels more frustrating as we watch others move towards throwing caution away with seemingly no compassion for those around them, especially those who are more at risk. We have lived through, in the last year, significant political turmoil and division, and we continue to be in a critical time of pushing for movements in areas of justice, both here and abroad. There is a great deal of suffering and heartache. If ever there was a time that we needed more compassion, it is now. Compassion, after all, at its most literal meaning, derives from the Latin and means to suffer together. However, I think a more full definition involves feeling another person's pain or distress and holding a desire to alleviate it. We need people who are willing to look at the suffering of the world and extend kindness, extend a hand or some move to help alleviate that suffering. While compassion for others requires a certain level of empathy, I do believe there's another step we need to take first: holding compassion for ourselves. While it seems counterintuitive to being compassionate to put yourself first, it is necessary to fill your own cup before trying to, in turn, share outward with others. I think about it as being like a parent nursing their child. In order to produce and give milk, they need to be drinking water and getting enough nutrition. In order to give compassion, we need to first become full of it for ourselves. When we extend compassion to ourselves, we do so by looking at ourselves and our lives without judgment, but instead with kindness. We affirm our worth and dignity simply because we are worthy as human beings. I might lean into my tradition that sees humans as a reflection of the divine or a reflection of God. Or maybe I might try to imagine seeing myself as a trusted loved one sees me. I might extend that same kindness and well wishes to myself that this loved one would. Of course, this doesn't mean that we don't see our growing edges. Compassion isn't just pithy affirmations and rainbows. Rather, it involves a sort of mindful awareness of ourselves and our experiences. We can see ourselves and our mistakes simply as they are, without ignoring them or being defined by them. We can see the hardship or the hurt that we experience simply as they are, without ignoring it or being mired and down in it. Self-compassion allows us to face both our own mistakes as well as the pain that we are experiencing in our lives. First, as we face our mistakes, we are able to see our growing edges in a mindful and kind way. Yes, I made a mistake. And also, it's not the whole of who I am. It doesn't define me. I remember that I am a person of inherent worth, or I try to see myself maybe the way a loved one sees me. When I see myself in this fullness, I know that I am okay, even with my flaws. In fact, being able to face mistakes and not shut down into shame means that we can actually evolve and choose more compassionate actions going forward. So, for example, as a white person who perpetuates racism, even if I do so unconsciously, I need to be able to face that and move through it. A researcher, Dr. Kristen Neff, points out that self-compassion can be helpful in this instance. She says, white people often resist acknowledging their own negative stereotypes about people of color due to the shame it causes. No one wants to believe that they are racist. The shame that wells up at the mere insinuation of racism interferes with our ability to acknowledge the unconscious bias that undergirds systemic racism. Being kind and understanding towards ourselves facilitates the ability to see that even when we don't consciously hold racist views, racism unconsciously influences our interactions with others simply by virtue of growing up in a racist society. If we can acknowledge these biases without harsh self-judgment, we have a chance to correct them. I believe she is right. That self-compassion is critical towards outward compassion in one sense because being compassionate towards ourselves allows us to better change our behavior so that we are able to be more compassionate to others. Second, as we face the areas of pain in our lives, using self-compassion allows us tools to move through these things and find healing. We are able to face the pain and challenges in our lives by facing them for what they are and extending kindness to ourselves as a way of moving through them. We treat ourselves to love and gentleness when needed, and we remind ourselves of the full picture of our lives. Yes, this experience is painful, or that person hurt me, but I am loved. I am worthy. I might experience pain, but I am not my pain. I am not my experiences. When I started to have some physical challenges and pain from the onset of my ankylosing spondylitis, which is a type of arthritis that affects the spine and larger joints, I was very frustrated and discouraged at first. However, leaning into these practices of being mindful with my life and my experiences allow me to face things for what they are. It doesn't make the physical pain go away. However, it does allow me to see that my existence is not defined by it. My worth is not defined by what my body can or can't do. And my happiness is not contingent on any of these things either. I simply accept each day as it comes and greet it and myself with kindness and compassion. So then self-compassion isn't an easy pep talk in the mirror, but rather being able to be present with yourself and your experiences and still hold space for kindness. Extending compassion to yourself is both very simple and also takes time and tremendous strength and courage to do that work. Of course, filling ourselves with compassion gives us the source of love and strength to in turn extend it to others as well. So again, much like that image of the nursing parent, if we aren't fulfilling our needs for compassion, we will burn out or experience compassion fatigue if we only try to extend compassion to others. So as we move towards focusing compassion outwards, we do so grounded and centered in kindness. We are compassionate to ourselves. And when we are more compassionate to ourselves, we can more fully extend that compassion to others. Of course, on the practical side of things, not only are we in a better state of mind, but we can also use these same tools that we use for ourselves and extending compassion to ourselves as we then in turn approach others. For me, I am able to use the same open-minded view I have turned on myself as I view others. I am able to exercise empathy. I am able to approach others with mindfulness to see things as they are, neither ignoring the bad nor having it define them either. I think if we are honest, we would admit that we probably have hundreds of opportunities to practice exercising compassion around us each day. Maybe it's something small, someone cuts you off in traffic, or your partner is doing something that upsets you. We can make choices to exercise compassion in these moments. We can exercise empathy. Having this empathy and compassion may lead us towards unity and resolution. And of course, there are other times when it isn't easy. And those moments, cultivating compassion is a conscious choice. This is especially true in the case of those of us who have hurt us, or for whom finding compassion is very difficult. As we talk about compassion, I am mindful that we are also honoring the life and legacy of Thich Nhat Hanh, who passed away this week. His teachings on compassion have been a guide for many people all over the world, so it seems fitting to share his words in regards to the challenges of compassion. On this he said, "It can be difficult to feel compassion towards those who have wronged us or people with opposing views and beliefs. But therein lies the issue. We believe compassion is a feeling, something we either possess or we don't. But we should not be waiting or trying to feel compassion. Compassion is something that we should be doing. It takes effort to find it and practice to cultivate it. We must stop waiting for it to arrive and instead build both compassion and empathy within ourselves. For these difficult people, I return to those same tools I use to grant myself compassion when I feel I don't deserve it. I approach them with non-judgment. I often lean into empathy, or at least curiosity, as I wonder what might be happening in that person that they chose or needed to act the way that they did. Perhaps they have insecurities, or perhaps they aren't having their needs met, whether that's a physical need or an emotional need. Perhaps they are experiencing some pain themselves. Thich Nhat Hanh is also quoted as saying, when another person makes you suffer, it is because he suffers deeply within himself and his suffering is spilling over. I think often this is the case. When I can see this person, see this in a person, I am able to see them with the eyes of compassion and kindness. I am better able to set aside judgment and instead see their behavior as a piece of who they are, rather than defining who they are. I want to share with you an example of how this has come up in my life recently. I came across something about a month or so ago that reminded me of some people from my past who had hurt me. They were religious people from early adolescence who essentially bullied me for being gay. So I found myself thinking about this, and of course my lower mind wanted to tell them how awful and how wrong they are. And this is true. They are kind of mean and wrong. And also, none of that was making me feel any better. And so I leaned into my self-compassion first. I extended kindness to those parts of me that felt wounded. I reminded myself that I am not who they think I am, but am a spark of the divine, a person worthy of love and respect. This first step allowed me to begin to heal those wounds. Then, as I began to explore what compassion for these individuals would look like, I was able to turn that outward. I began thinking, I found myself thinking, they probably were taught some sort of fear, maybe they were taught this fear of divine punishment. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't, I don't know. But I tried to see them as full people, beyond just their actions. They too are people of inherent worth and dignity, worthy of love and compassion. The sum of who they are is not their actions towards me. That doesn't excuse them or their behavior. It simply allows me to release them from my mind. I don't think that this is like a forgive and forget type of thing, but rather for myself, I will not allow this to live in me anymore. Holding on to anger, I wasn't doing anything to change them, but only continuing to allow the past to live inside of me. So for me, extending compassion was really a matter of releasing them from my life. To be clear, extending compassion to someone doesn't mean that you excuse harmful behavior or that you allow yourself to be a doormat. Holding compassion for another person does not mean that you don't have boundaries. If for some reason my life were to intersect with these people again, I would have firm boundaries around how they could interact with me. It may be that it would be appropriate for me to state calmly to them that their behavior was harmful. Either way, it would be a boundary that I would set, but it would be a boundary that was set from a place of groundedness and self-kindness rather than something that was lashing out in anger. So having compassion doesn't mean that you don't stand up for yourself. Rather, holding compassion means that even as you draw boundaries or take a stand, that you do so from a place that is grounded in kindness and in love and compassion. Having compassion for a person also does not mean that you continue to allow that person to be a part of your life, or at least a part of your close circle. It is possible to view someone with compassion while also holding a boundary that it is not healthy for you to be in relationship with one another. That doesn't make you uncompassionate. In fact, that's very compassionate, I think, to both people involved. So compassion isn't just, again, warm and fuzzy feelings. At times, compassion is strong. It can be protective. And yet, even in those places of firmness, it is rooted in the desire for all to not experience suffering. I look around me and I see, again, this world that is hurting. And I just have to wonder, what would it be like? What would it look like if we as conscious people began to cultivate more compassion? I imagine that we might find more healing and kindness for our own selves. I imagine that we might find more connection and unity in our relationships. And while it may seem idealistic or dreamy, I do believe that as we share compassion, it is something that catches on and indeed has the ability to create a more compassionate community or even a more compassionate world. Thank you for allowing me to share these reflections with you. I invite you, if they resonate with you, to take time in the next week, the next day, and the next week, and examine how you might find ways to practice compassion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kimball, for your words today. Please join us on Zoom immediately following today's broadcast, where we will have our meet and greet and discuss the themes brought up in today's talk, as well as sharing personal joys, sorrows, and concerns, and community announcements. You can find the access code, or the link, I should say, in the chat section of today's broadcast. Next week, we will be welcoming back to First E, Anthony Knight. We hope that you join us again next Sunday when Anthony will be speaking. And until then, have a great rest of your day, great rest of your weekend, and the coming week ahead. Bye-bye.